Do me a favor, raise your hand nice and high if your people are from Louisiana, because if they are, you are gonna go nuts for today's recipe. We are making, hold your horses, a praline pecan bread pudding bundt cake. I'm gonna say that one more time. Praline pecan bread pudding bundt cake. This is for all of you that have gone completely bananas over my praline pecan recipe. I posted it years ago and you guys are still falling in love with the recipe every single year over and over and over again. So I was like, I gotta do something for my people, for my day ones, for all of my followers that have been along for the ride for all of this time. So grab your ingredients and let's get started. Okay, so in order to pull off this bread pudding situation that we got going on here, you are gonna need day-old French loaf bread cut into bite-sized pieces. I have them torn into about 1-inch cubes. Take them, set them to the side once you have those ready, and then we're gonna mix together. If you ever made French toast, you know how you take the bread, you soak it, let it absorb all of the flavor and moisture. That is what we're doing with this bread pudding situation. So we have 1/4 cup of bourbon, totally optional. You don't have to use it. It's just gonna add a depth of flavor. In a shallow bowl, go ahead and pour in your bourbon. Next, I'm using whole milk for this recipe. Of course, you can use a non-dairy alternative if you'd like. 4 cups of milk. One cup of granulated sugar. Now, for this next step, you have 2 options. I recently purchased some vanilla bean paste that I'm super excited to try out. So I'm gonna use 1/2 tablespoon of this vanilla bean paste, but if you don't have paste, don't worry about it. Instead, you're gonna double your measurements. You are gonna use a tablespoon, yes, a full tablespoon of vanilla extract. And the last thing we are gonna add to this wet mixture, 4 large eggs. I'm gonna beat these eggs together before adding them into the mixture. It's just gonna make everything a lot easier to incorporate. Once you have all of the egg yolks broken up, everything is nice and liquidy, now we can pour it in with the rest of our wet mixture. Now the last thing that we need to do is mix together all of our wet ingredients until everything is well combined. We also want the sugar to start to dissolve. That way the bread can absorb that liquid sugar instead of getting those kind of like crusty granules of sugar stuck all over our French loaf. We want all of that sugar flavor, all of that vanilla bean to absorb into the bread and just hold on to and retain all of that delicious flavor. All right, now that everything is mixed together well, I don't see any yolks floating around, no huge clumps of sugar or vanilla bean. Grab that bowl that you have with all of your cubed French bread in it, and you are gonna slowly, gently, and carefully pour your wet mixture all over the bread. That way, we can let this bread soak for about 10 to 15 minutes, and we'll keep going with the rest of the ingredients. As you're pouring, you just wanna make sure everything is evenly distributed. You wanna make sure each and every piece of bread is coated, it's soaking. That way, all of the bread has an opportunity to absorb all of this delicious flavor. So looking closely here, I can see that I have a few pieces of bread that are really dry, and I wanna make sure I get those coated nicely. So I'm gonna take a spoon, and I'm just gonna scoop up some of this liquid and kind of toss the bread around a little bit. Important thing though, don't squish it. We don't want it to be too soggy. We kind of want it to retain its shape. All right, you guys, I have already got it started on the praline pecan sauce. I am melting 1 stick of butter in a saucepan over medium heat. As that's melting, I'm grabbing the rest of my ingredients because I know I need to move quickly. We don't want to take our eyes off of this sauce because it will burn and it's just gonna ruin everything and I have to start all over again. So keep a close eye on it. We're gonna be working with this sauce for about 3 to 5 minutes. I can already see that it's heating up quickly, so let me grab my next ingredient. I am grabbing 1/2 cup of brown sugar. I ran out of light brown sugar, so I'm actually gonna do a 50-50 split. I have some dark brown sugar, which is equally as delicious, just has more of that molasses flavor to it, and 1/4 cup of light brown sugar. So I'm gonna add in my sugar, and we go. And then I'm gonna grab big scoop. Make sure you pack in your brown sugar, by the way. That's really important. Brown sugar retains a lot of moisture, and so if it's not packed, you're not really getting a true measurement. Things are heating up quickly like I knew they would, so grab your whisk and start to combine your sugar and your melted butter. If you need to, you can turn the heat down just a little bit. As you can see, as the sugar starts to dissolve, we are getting that gorgeous caramel color, those gorgeous nutty caramel smells. This is the praline pecan sauce that I have been dreaming of. Next, I'm adding just a 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon and some of that freshly grated nutmeg that I love so much. This nutmeg came from Africa. It has such a versatile flavor profile. I love it. I'm gonna use I'm gonna go with 1/4 teaspoon. I wouldn't do any less than 1/8 of a teaspoon, or else it's kind of a waste. You won't even taste it. I'm still moving as quickly as I possibly can. That way I make sure that all of my ingredients are coming together in this sauce. I've also adjusted my heat. I'm turning it down to low because I can see that this is thickening up really quickly. Now, we can't call it praline pecans without our pecans. So I have 1 cup of chopped pecans ready to pour into this mixture. I have also turned my heat all the way off. As the mixture is still hot, I'm gonna add in my nuts. That helps me make sure that I don't burn the nuts. Grab that whisk. Make sure all of those nuts are beautifully coated. Oh, this smells heavenly, you guys. I can already see that now that the nuts are in there, everything is starting to thicken up. This is perfect. All right, praline pecans, check. Bread pudding, check. Now all we need is our Bundt pan, nice, greased, and ready to go. And I'm just gonna start layering everything in. I'm gonna start with the bread pudding. I'm gonna scoop it out gently because I don't wanna tear any of these pieces of bread, especially now that they're extra soft. And I'm just gonna gently scoop them off, drain off some of that excess batter, and I'm gonna evenly place them inside of my Bundt cake pan. Just drain off any of the excess liquid that may be in there. We don't want a ruddy bread pudding. And then go ahead and put it on the bottom layer. I'm gonna use about half of this. I'm going with 4 layers, a layer of the bread pudding, a layer of pecans, layer of bread pudding, layer of pecans. So I'm gonna fill this bottom portion with about half of the bread pudding, making sure everything is evenly distributed. That way my cake comes out nice and balanced. And probably just 1 more generous scoop here. Draining off some of that excess. Perfect. I'm just gonna spread these out evenly. Grab a hold of my pecans. Ooh, they are already starting to harden. Oh my gosh. These are so delicious. I'm gonna use half of this mixture as well, just evenly sprinkled over the top. Some of them may fall to the bottom. That's okay, because if you remember, we're gonna invert this. So the bottom is actually gonna be the top. This is gonna give this beautiful crunch in every single bite of this bread pudding Bundt cake. Now it's time for my second layer of bread. Again, letting all of that excess liquid just kind of drip right off. And then right on top of those pecans it goes. And I'm kind of gonna give it just like a gentle pat, so that way I can make sure all of this fits inside of this cake pan. There we go. There we go. And again, I'm just gonna give it a little pat down with the back of the wooden spoon, draining off all of that excess, filling in any gaps that I see. I can already tell my family is gonna go crazy for this. My family goes nuts, no pun intended, for praline pecans. They pretty much are obsessed with anything that I make that's sweet and buttery and utilizes brown sugar and pecans to perfection. And I must say, this recipe is one of them. And last but certainly not least, the rest of our pecans are going on as our last addition. And again, just making sure that they're spread out nice and evenly. Okay, now before I cover this with aluminum foil and put it in the oven, I am actually gonna add about a tablespoon of brown sugar on this bottom layer. Technically right now it's the top layer, but remember we're inverting the cake. So right now, the top layer that's facing us, I'm gonna sprinkle brown sugar on top. That is gonna give this cake this extra layer of crunch. It's gonna create this brown, golden, delicious, molasses-rich crust on the bottom of the cake. That's just adding that extra right? Like that's my chef's kiss. All right, last thing we need to do to prevent this cake from burning. 1 piece of aluminum foil, just gently placed on top. Because this is staying in the oven for close to an hour, we really don't want it to burn, and this foil is gonna give it the protection it needs. We are also gonna prepare for any drippage that may occur while this is baking. It's very moist, and as it begins to bubble and the butter begins to melt, it could leak over into the oven. So I have a trick for us. Baking sheet. We are gonna sit the Bundt cake pan on top of the baking sheet, like so. And we're gonna place this in the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for anywhere between 50 to 60 minutes. I just took her out of the oven. She needs to cool for about 10 to 15 minutes before we invert her. So just let her rest on the counter. She's gonna simmer down just a little bit. All of those juices are gonna start to caramelize, and then we'll flip it and enjoy it. Before you leave today, I want you to pat yourself on the back for making this delicious beauty right here. I have already topped it with some vanilla ice cream and caramel sauce. I'm gonna dive into this. I really hope you guys enjoy this recipe. You know where to find it on my blog. Link is always down below. Until next time, cheers.